Hello, everyone. Check, check, 1, 2. You think so? They're going for the live stream, but I don't
substance abuse counselor now. So I like to say that I am the moccasins on the ground. It makes a excellent opportunity for me as a tribal citizen to have immediate rapport with my people. And my heart is for my tribe, to heal our land, to heal our people, to heal our community from all of the things that we face, which are a lot of mental health and substance misuse issues that also contribute to, criminalized activity, domestic violence, and other things that a lot of us that live in tribal communities see every day. But I'm also proud to stand as a citizen model to show people that, change is possible for anyone. Healing is for anybody, and it's definitely for our people.
So I'm going to share about Catawba history and how that relates to the issues we're experiencing today. So forgive me for reading from my script on this because it's a lot of history and dates and things of that nature. So the Catawba Indians have lived on their ancestral lands along the banks of the Catawba River dating back at least 6,000 years. They call themselves Yeiswongre, meaning people of the river. The Catawba River is the lifeblood of the Catawba people and has provided for the people for many, many years. It provided drinking water, habitat for fish, a place for purification, and it was a major transportation artery. It was also a gathering place for spiritual or social activities. Before contact with Europeans, Catawbas inhabited most of the Piedmont area of South Carolina, North Carolina, and parts of Virginia. Early colonial estimates of the Catawba population when settlers arrived are between 15,000 and 25,000. Initially, there was little contact between the nation and early settlers because new colonies were barely surviving. Once the Virginia colony of Jamestown and the Carolina colony of Charlestown, or now called Charleston, became more established, this changed. By the late 17th century, trade began having a major impact on the Catawba society. In 1759, smallpox swept through the Catawba villages for the fourth time in a century, bringing the population of the nation to less than 1,000 by 1760. Colonists believed the nation was dying out. In 1763, the Catawbas received title to 144,000 acres from the King of England in the Treaty of Augusta. It was hard for the nation to protect the land from colonists, and eventually they began renting land to settlers. Eventually, the settlers who had leased land from the nation wanted the land for themselves. They put pressure on South Carolina to negotiate with the nation. Settlers were not making their lease payments, and the Catawbas began losing control of their land. This also changed the landscape. Hunting and fishing, and the Catawbas were suffering. As a result, the nation was forced into signing the Treaty of the Nations Ford, which was an illegal treaty because it was not passed by federal Congress. And it stipulated that the Catawbas relinquished to the state of South Carolina their 144,000 acres of land. In return, South Carolina promised the nation a new tract of land in a less populated area and to pay the Catawbas money. To a nation whose people were starving and experiencing such great loss, this seemed like the only option. However, things didn't go well. The money never came, and the Catawba people never found a tract of land to settle on. In fact, in the 1840s, there was a 5-year period where the Catawba Nation had no land or a place to call home. Around this same time, friends, or we call them family, in Catawba, there's actually no word for friend. If you're a friend of Catawba, you are family. So Friends of Catawba Nation purchased about 600 acres of land and gave it to South Carolina to put into state trust for Catawba Nation. Government policy towards tribes changed in the 1950s, and many tribes were asked to terminate their federal status. In 1959, the Catawba Nation was terminated in the eyes of the federal government. In 1973, Catawbas organized and sought to regain federal recognition. It took 20 years and relentless effort, but in 1993, the Catawbas agreed to give up their claims on the land taken from them by the state of South Carolina. In return, the Catawba Indian Nation received federal recognition and money for economic development, education, social services, and land purchases. Today, the Catawbas inhabit 2 discontinuous reservation lands situated on the banks of the Catawba River and have a population of over 3,600. So back up just a little bit, the 1973 group that organized to regain, in efforts to regain federal recognition, Erica's dad was actually a part of that group. They spent lots of their own money and time traveling and advocating for their people. And so I just want to acknowledge his role in that, and the others that fought so hard. So you heard a little bit about the challenges that Catawba Nation has faced through the years, and their incredible resilience to still exist today. So some of those things that we mentioned, colonization. So I share a little history about the colonization within Catawba Nation, but it's important to note that that you all are very well aware of, that colonization still has large impacts on Catawba culture and day-to-day life. Colonization is not just an event. It is ongoing through policy and law, lack of representation, and misrepresentation. Younger generations are not practicing traditional Catawba culture. No one alive speaks the language fluently, and many are growing up without a working knowledge of their heritage because of the effects of colonization. Historical and intergenerational trauma, displacement, boarding schools, cultural genocide, and violence. Those are things that still show up in our generations today. In fact, some of you may have read in the news recently, Catawba sought to repatriate one of their young tribal citizens from the Carlisle Indian boarding school. And we're not successful in that effort. The body was not found in the location that he was supposed to be in. So we're still working on that, but that was a pretty difficult experience for our community. Our kids were really excited to bring him home. His name was Wade Ayers. And when that didn't happen, it was pretty tough. I think it was felt around our community for sure. So federal recognition, the Catawba Nation lost federal recognition in 1959 and fought for 20+ years to regain federal status in 1993. It was a very, very tough battle and lots of challenges along the way, but I think the resiliency of our leaders and their commitment and dedication to regaining federal recognition really is a lesson that we can all learn from today. So some of the risk factors for substance abuse, suicide, and mental illness include poverty and lack of education. So our tribal demographic survey, which was done in 2018, illustrated that 80% of Catawba children receive free or reduced lunch. 46% of households are at or below the national poverty level. And according to our local school district, a whopping 58% of Catawba students do not finish high school on time, and 38% do not even graduate. Of this overall figure, 15% have less than a ninth grade education. Also, in terms of opioid use disorder, the USET Epidemiology Center reports that the rate of Catawba citizens diagnosed with opioid use disorder in 2017 nearly doubled from 2 years prior to that. But we know, that number looked small on paper, but we know, working in the field that we do and knowing some anecdotal information with the clients that we work with in our behavioral health department and in our family services department, which handles all of our ICWA cases, that number remains significantly higher in terms of hospitalizations, deaths, matters of child custody, and the clients who are coming to us for services. So in 2020, we also conducted a survey in our Justice Department that told us 65% of citizens felt like alcohol abuse was a major problem, 87% felt like drug abuse was a major problem, and 72% felt like drug dealing and sales was a major problem.
So how do we resolve all of these issues? Well, with the restructuring within our tribe from Family Services to the Department of Health and Human Services. And with that, two aspects, a social services component, which deals with everyday things like general welfare assistance, senior programs, and other things like that. And our side with the behavioral health, so mental health, substance misuse, and more things as we move forward. We realize that change starts at the top and works its way down. So what we did was we worked together to create a resolution that we presented to our chief and leaders, stating that we had a emergency issue on our reservation in connection to mental health and especially substance misuse and all of the things that occur as a result of those unresolved issues. And with that, we provided them with the opportunity to approve the creation of a drug action task force. And what that means is that we had three initial components: community watch, mobile crisis response, and the creation of a healing village in ways to directly address and find solutions for these problems by working with outside partners, with our tribal leadership, and with the community citizens themselves. All in a goal to connect and collaborate. And, these are paramount in our efforts to create healing and wellness within our Catawba Nation community. So this slide that you see is from one of the first initial meetings. It doesn't show all of the people that were there at that angle, but we created a program. I called it Warrior Way Community Watch. So if you think about all of us Indigenous communities, what the true meaning of a warrior is. It's someone who doesn't fight alone. So we're all in this fight together and we're all warriors. I call myself, Haley, all of the people that are part of helping to bring healing to our community, as well as those citizens ourselves. We're the recovery warriors. And that's the name of the peer recovery group that we have. So Community Watch is an effort with our public safety official that has just come on board, our behavioral health staff, as well as our local law enforcement, which is the York County Sheriff's Office, to work together with tribal citizen volunteers in the multiple neighborhoods that we have within our community to discuss the issues within each of the neighborhoods, and then to work together to find a solution to those problems. And, with a key focus on mental health and substance misuse, but it also gives us a great opportunity to provide education, which is a key part of a lot of things in Native communities. So Narcan training for citizens and staff, because we do have staff that are non-tribal, self-defense training, CPR training, anything down to everyday things like life skill classes, whatever our people need to give them the best opportunity to be, self-sufficient and to be able to provide for themselves. And Community Watch provides us with increased Indigenous and Catawba specific data that we can share with these partners and with USET and SAMHSA, DEODIS, and all of these other entities that help to provide us with physical support, financial support, and to, work on developing further and implementing new programming to resolve all of these issues that we face.
So another one of our initiatives is the mobile crisis response. So Erica's kind of passion project is the Warrior Way Community Watch program, and mine is the mobile crisis response. So we have a mobile crisis response that is operates through the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, and they have a mobile crisis unit that will come out. It's dispatched. They have an hour, I think, to respond, and but they have a very, very large service area. And so one of the frequent themes that we commonly heard in our community was response times. They're way too long, not just for mobile crisis, but law enforcement, EMT, all those services. We're kind of rural or remote. It takes a good few minutes to get on and off the reservation. And so by the time these agencies are coming from all the way on the other side of the county, when a crisis is happening, think about a time in your life where maybe you felt like you were in a crisis. You want an immediate solution to that, right? Like, we don't want to wait an hour, because what can happen in an hour? So we also wanted to make sure that we were providing culturally appropriate responses to crisis calls. And so that just wasn't being offered with our local Department of Mental Health. So it was created because of response times. And we also had at the time a pretty poor relationship with county law enforcement. So no one was calling law enforcement when things happened, because they didn't always have the best, interactions with our community. So the concept is that when a crisis occurs, there is a designated phone line available for the tribal mobile crisis response team. And then it is deployed, accompanied by law enforcement. So law enforcement goes only to assess safety, to secure the scene, make sure that everybody's, there's no threat to staff or anybody that would be responding. And then they kind of step away and let the team do their job in terms of addressing the crisis. So who's on the team? That is comprised of a licensed clinician or social worker, a peer support person, a cultural liaison, and a community health nurse. So those people get dispatched into the community to respond to the crisis. And we're not just talking about mental health crises, we're also talking about substance related crises. So if someone is experiencing an overdose, they can call us. Obviously, we still want them to call 911. If they are experiencing maybe a really high stress situation with a family member, and they need like a mediator or someone to kind of dissolve the situation a little bit. So how we kind of developed a work group and oversight for the mobile crisis response through implementing the Multi-Disciplinary Drug Action Task Force. So that team helps us develop policies and procedures for mobile crisis response. And then also note about policies and procedures. This is kind of an ongoing process because we have undergone some restructuring and has kind of brought to light some needs to have more consistent policies and procedures throughout our departments, because a lot of us are involved in these crisis situations, but some of our policies and procedures don't necessarily say or reflect the same things. So this has kind of all been a learning process for a lot of us. And then through the multidisciplinary task force, we also wanted to obtain our Narcan distributorship, so the mobile crisis response can disperse Narcan when we're out in the community on these crisis calls. So we did run into an issue with gaining our distributorship. We were wanting to use we have an IHS facility, the Catawba service unit on our reservation. We wanted to use their pharmacy as a hub to store and to have our Narcan delivered there. But we ran into some issues with figuring out how to make that work. So that's a work in progress. We also collaborated with public safety to determine how mobile crisis response can collaborate with law enforcement. So we brought on, or we developed our own public safety department, and they are in charge of building our own tribal police department. So in our settlement agreement with South Carolina, the York County Sheriff's Office has jurisdiction on our reservation. So we rely on them and have for many years for policing and things of that nature. So like I said, our relationship kind of got a little wonky there for a while. But since bringing on our own director of public safety, we have really been able to work on our relationship with the York County Sheriff's Office and restore some of those professional relationships. And so we've actually been contracting with some of the officers with the county to patrol in the evenings and on weekends for overtime duty for them. So while we are still in the process of bringing on our own tribal law enforcement, we're able to utilize them as a short-term solution. So they've been great at attending all of our drug action task force meetings and really being involved with the development of mobile crisis response. So we're happy with the direction that is going in. We also want community involvement and a sense of responsibility in preventing overdose. So the efforts in our community watch program that Erica talked about. And we also, you went down a little bit too far. We want to reduce unnecessary incarcerations and hospitalizations, reduce fatal overdoses, provide culturally appropriate responses. So we have a cultural liaison on the team that can practice traditional medicine in hopes that maybe that won't require, hospitalization or and that they feel a little bit more comfortable in the interactions with the mobile crisis team. We also want to increase the mental health literacy in our community by educating our first responders, law enforcement, school personnel, and our team on trauma-informed suicide prevention, and increase the number of individuals receiving mental health services. So in the concept of mobile crisis is folks need to have someone to call, someone to respond, somewhere to go, somewhere to stay, and continued support, so follow up. We're addressing the someone to call with the line, the team to respond, somewhere to go. So they need to have a program or some resource to get connected to. Well, what happens if they don't have, if we get them here, we get them to treatment, we get them connected to services, but they have a totally unstable living situation or home life. And so somewhere to stay that's supportive of their recovery, and then follow-up services with continued support. So we also have developed a partnership with an organization called Challenges Inc. They're a harm reduction organization. We're going to talk more in detail about that, but the mobile crisis team will also provide harm reduction kits. Those include PPE, pregnancy tests, condoms, fentanyl test strips, Band-Aids, cotton swabs, tourniquets, alcohol prep pads, hydration packs, and antiseptic, and overdose education and behavioral health resources. So I would say some of our successes with mobile crisis have been our collaboration with law enforcement. We anticipated, I think, that being a much more difficult partnership and collaboration than it actually ended up being. So we're super grateful for their willingness to come on board and join our efforts. And I think our challenges have been restructuring our department, staffing changes, and then transportation. So one of the things that we ran into when developing mobile crisis response was I kind of went in like just full force. Like I want to decrease overdoses. I want, all these great things, but I was kind of putting the cart before the horse. And so we kind of had to back up and look at it on a smaller scale, how to prepare for that. So that's really been our process with that. But transportation has been one of those hiccups because with restructuring and departmental changes, then we were left with no vehicle to operate mobile crisis response out of. So we have some funding for that, but it's getting a solid foundation in place before we can actually utilize those funds for a vehicle. Erica and I have literally been using our own vehicles when folks call us in crisis to go respond. So not always the best, but we kind of work with what we got. I did want to give you guys some best practices with some other organizations that are using mobile crisis response. So in my research, I came across Southern Chiefs Organization. The link to their website is there. They have a more broad crisis response team. No, 1 second, that might be the wrong one. Mental wellness and mobile crisis response that supports Southern First Nation citizens and communities during times of crisis. So this is a 10-person team that works in a collaborative way with the Southern Knowledge Keepers, elders, and culturally appropriate mental health teams and clinical wellness service providers, and it operates 24/7. The CA Tribal Crisis Response Team is a kind of more broad crisis response. It includes environmental disasters and crises of those nature as well. The South Carolina Department of Mental Health is kind of how we started our framework, and they operate in the state of South Carolina in all counties. It is accessible to our community, but like I said, because of our rural location, response times are too long, and they don't connect to tribally specific resources. CIT International, or Crisis Intervention Team, is an innovative first responder model of police-based crisis intervention with community health care and advocacy partnerships. So if you have a tribal law enforcement, CIT would be great training for them to get certified. They can actually register their team as crisis intervention teams. And SAMHSA has also been provided a guide to help local systems use data to implement crisis intervention team programs to improve safety and effectiveness of law enforcement response to people experiencing behavioral health crises. So here you'll see a link to that. It provides information about building necessary partnerships, documenting program activities, identifying key metrics, establishing data collection processes, analyzing and reporting data, and using data to improve programs.
So one of our long-term goals, when you think about the model that Haley shared, where it talked about the different parts of it, when we get to that, someplace to go. A lot of times we know that one of the most critical times for people when they're having mental health or substance issues is right before they go to treatment, and especially when they come back. That's also true of tribal citizens who are incarcerated, especially for long periods of time, because we know that often, most times when they have fatal overdoses is when they're released and they go back to the same home and the same environment, and they try to use the same amount of substances that they did before, and they don't have the same tolerance, and often they overdose, and sometimes they're fatal. And we have definitely seen that, sadly, within our community. So we want to create a healing village. So what this would consist of is transitional housing for people. And I know it says from incarceration or inpatient treatment back into the community, but also before people go into treatment, while they are looking to make those connections to resources, because at this time, we don't have any of those on and within the tribe itself. So we refer out for everything to outside resources, but it would be a centralized location. So if you think of houses, a number of houses on one side of the land for females and houses on the opposite side of the area for male clients, and then like a wellness center within the middle. So we could do cooking classes, life skill classes, GED prep, GED testing, all of the things that we know that the people that have these issues need to get their lives back on track, but be able to connect them directly to those resources. There again, having things on the reservation right within their community that's easily accessible, and either training or hiring staff to be there to provide those things at all times, while also monitoring these people's health and well-being 24 hours a day before and after those things. So it directly addresses that somewhere to stay and somewhere to go component of the crisis response. But also with that, being that we are an indigenous tribe, we also want to include our culture in that. So pottery classes, language classes, beadwork classes, the implementation of sweat lodge and all of these things, because we know that our culture is prevention and healing and recovery. And it is never too late, no matter what people's experiences in life, whether they've been on or off the reservation, as long as they draw breath, they have the opportunity to reconnect back to that. And that is at the core of who and what we are.
So some of the, and you can probably, there's a couple pictures again. Some of the best practices and traditional methods of healing that we have worked to incorporate in our programs are prevention services. We recently implemented a behavior modification program coupled with group therapy and life skill classes at our teen center, or Sukyap, I'm sorry. Soon to extend to Sukyap program. And this is an adolescent behavioral health program that originated in the San Carlos Apache tribe, and it was called Young Warriors. We kind of modified it to meet the needs of our community. So how it works, the behavior modification part of it is the youth identify their group expectations. So what they expect from each other and from to be able to, I guess, guide their interactions while they're at camp or in the after school programs. And they earn points, or Sawonka Day, we call them stand-ups. So the whole concept of Catawba Youth Rise, let me go back a little bit. RISE stands for Resilient, Indigenous, Strong, and Empowered. And they got to vote on this name and came up with it on their own. So they had a little bit of investment from the beginning. But so the concept is rising up to your potential, rising up from adversity. And there's a Catawba word for rise, and that is Sawonka Day. And so they earn points, or Sawonka Day, for any time they are caught doing a positive behavior or having a positive interaction or completing a difficult task, not giving up on something that was hard. Anything positive that you can think of, they get a point for it. If they do something that goes, that is in contrast to one of the expectations that they set forth, they earn an Ugwang Day, which is a sit down, the opposite of stand up. And so they can earn as many points. There's no limit to how many points they can earn, but they cannot spend their points in the store that has all kinds of goodies and treats and clothing and games, art supplies, makeup. I mean, anything you could think of that a teenager would like, it's in there. Sunglasses, earbuds, pop sockets, all kinds of stuff. Phone chargers, because you know they cannot be without their phones. So they can shop in the store every day, and they can spend their points in the store. Well, they cannot spend their points in the store if they've earned a Ugwang Day until they complete a community service project. So that could include helping one of the staff people clean up after lunch, or helping prepare a meal, or our grand large scale idea is that they would assist elders in our community with some projects that they need completed around their house, or like yard work, things like that. They can do work down at the sweat lodge to keep the grounds up. So there's a number of community service projects that they have available to them to complete so that they can spend their points in the store, which they're all highly motivated to do. And then they also get a group therapy and life skill group. They get 2 group therapy sessions a week and 2 life skill groups a week. And they also get a cultural life skill group. So that includes, we've had language classes. Every morning they open with a drum ceremony. So we have one of our tribal elders, Monty Branham. He's actually pictured down here in the corner, revitalizing the sweat lodge there. But he has recently come on board with our childcare programs to teach cultural programming. And so every morning he's leading drum groups, and I have never seen what's happening right now in our community. It is just phenomenal. So from the time that I worked on this PowerPoint up until now, so much has changed just by childcare getting on board and collaborating with behavioral health and our cultural leaders to implement some of this stuff in our programs. It's really been a drastic change. I mean, I drive into the Longhouse in the morning and I get out of my car and the teens are outside around the drum. There's probably, I don't know, 25 of them crammed in there as tight as they can get, because none of them want to sit on the outside. They want to be in there drumming. So it's been an incredible thing. But we've had drumming, pottery. Another of our elders comes over and does basketry with them. We've had some tribal citizens come over and do lessons on sovereignty, self-determination, tribal government. Did I say language classes? Yeah, so all kinds of stuff. And they're really into that. So they've been pretty engaged in the program. And we're going to be transitioning it over into our younger kids as well, to their after-school program starting in the fall. Treatment services. So we are currently operating through telehealth services. We are contracting with several providers. A lot of them are out west, so that's been an adjustment with time zone changes for me. But we are also providing alcohol and drug treatment services, and in the works to create an IOP program on the reservation. That'll be the first time that's ever existed for us. And Erica does a great job partnering with our inpatient and outpatient treatment providers. So if we don't have a culturally specific program for someone to go to, the programs that we do contract with have been really good about allowing us to send in our cultural liaisons and elders to lead some groups over there. And even after our clients leave treatment, they still ask our tribal elders and leaders to come lead groups for the non-Indigenous folks, because everybody, they say that they've never had groups as engaged as when we have folks come in and lead groups for them. So we also are partnering with medication-assisted treatment providers. We recognize that as a huge need in our community. So a lot of our folks are participating in MAT services. And I'll let Erica share about peer support services.
So like I mentioned briefly earlier, our weekly peer support meeting is the Catawba Peer Recovery Group. We're the Recovery Warriors. So I'm the only tribal citizen who, after next week, will be certified in all 7 of the White Bison trainings. So we will be able to register the Catawba Nation as a facility to train other people, as well as provide IOP classes that have the White Bison trainings as the basis for those programs, especially under our justice services for the reentry and service treatment programs. Our recovery group meets each Thursday. And the great thing about doing it ourselves is, just like Haley was talking about with the youth program, we incorporate our culture into everything that we are. So we have cultural immersions once a month, so people can do pottery, beadwork, basket making, language. The adults and everything also help to work on regalias for people who cannot make them or don't know how to do those skills themselves, to help to provide them. So it's all about that connection, connecting the younger people to the adults and connecting the adults to the seniors, so that we're building this strong community together. And, changing the mentality of how some of the, surrounding community views the Catawba Nation. And it's a definite passion of mine. We've had another tribal citizen that has been recently certified as a peer support. So we've started an all recovery group off of the reservation as well, because the sad reality is sometimes tribal citizens don't want to come to that governmental office on a reservation. There's still some stigma there. There can be some trauma involved in that as well, feeling that maybe they are, looked negatively upon because they're there for that particular reason. So we're trying to do anything and everything that we can to create multiple opportunities in multiple locations for people to have groups that are culturally culturally specific to come to, because when they go to regular AA and NA programs, and they're wonderful programs, White Bison, started out as an AA program that was modified into something with a cultural basis, but they don't see anything of who and what they are, sadly, which is a lot of what we see in the community outside that we are in as well, even though we're the only federally recognized tribe in the state. So these are just, things that everyday things that we can do to try, as I said, to give our people, more and better opportunities to succeed.
Mhm. And I always say, I come from a place of clinician. And so I think that the relationship between clinician and peer support specialists is incredibly important when you're talking about working with a client, because peer support brings something totally different than what I can deliver as a therapist. And so that lived experience is often unparalleled. I mean, it really is. We want to grow our peer recovery program and have a mentorship program so we can get more certified Catawba peer support specialists on our team. So if you'll go back one slide, sorry. Multidisciplinary case management team, it's comprised of these different departments. And we kind of identified what's kind of been a long-standing idea that we kind of all get in our silos and we don't always collaborate and know the work that other departments are doing. And I don't know if that rings true in any of your communities, but we all feel like, well, I didn't even know they offered that service, or I didn't, So we thought it would be a good idea, because we know that the clients that we serve in behavioral health have many needs, right? Like, they don't just need behavioral health services. They need help finding a job. They need help creating a resume. They need help getting connected to health services, healthcare. They have legal issues that need to be resolved. All these things. So we created a team that basically includes someone from just about every department that provides services to our citizens. And once a month we meet and we staff cases. So we had to create MOUs with all these different departments. We made sure that we selected individuals that were that had high fidelity in their professionalism and attention to confidentiality and things of that nature. So that team meets once a month. We help connect folks to services within different departments. So, and it's not just behavioral health staffing our clients with this team. They are also staffing clients. So say someone in vocational services is working on getting a resume or trying to find a job, but the person in our economic development department is concerned that maybe the reason they haven't been able to hold down a job is because of substance use or something like that. So they can connect them to us through that multidisciplinary case management team. So it's both ways. And then harm reduction strategies. We have, with the assistance of USET funding, been able to purchase some items for harm reduction kits that we can distribute in our community, and especially in areas that we identify as hotspots of a lot of substance use. And then we are working with Challenges Inc. to contract with some needle exchange program services and also provide Narcan training to the community. We also revitalized the Sweat Lodge 2 or 3 years ago. And we've had a great response to that. So a lot of our community members are taking advantage of traditional methods of healing.
So one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier is how important that those leaders and the connections with partners and everything are to the programming that we're working on now and our short-term and long-term goals that we have. So our programs are developed and implement the support of our tribal leaders and also inclusion of community partnerships, which I said are critical to our success. So as I mentioned earlier, we created and passed a resolution with our tribal leaders to make them specifically aware of all of the issues. Sometimes they have a tendency to be more focused on the business and the politics and not the every day-to-day things. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. We also have asked and had their participation. Really, I don't ask, I voluntold them. We need to be here. Our people need to see you, not just in, political platforms, but in every day-to-day things. They need to know that they are citizens and they matter no matter what they're going through in life. Because as we well know, even when they have issues, they do still vote. So getting them involved in community things, being at Community Watch, being in, anything that we're doing, they also need to be educated. Like I say, because a lot of times their focus isn't on the things that we do, but to understand the importance and the necessity of those things, they need to be educated about what the reality of things truly are. Because they're not seeing him, they're not doing the work that we do every day. They trust us to do those things, but they need to be aware of what it is that we're doing and why. So also, our Celebrate Sobriety Banquet, which I'll speak about, community watch meetings and on-site trainings that we provide, as well as community education and engagement events like our Overdose Awareness Walk and a River Ramble for Recovery. Our behavioral health team has also reached out to other peoples for help and direct, provision of resources. So within our area, we have the Carolina Center for Recovery in Charlotte, Rock Hill Treatment Specialist for medication assisted treatment, and York County Treatment Specialist for that as well as Keystone for multiple services that they provide, Mount Sinai, Anchor of Hope, Sober Living, New Hope, Sober Living for Women, Favor, which is Faces and Voices of Recovery. They have multiple locations all around South Carolina, other states. NAMI, which is, a mental health, South Carolina Department of Mental Health, Deotis, York County Sheriff's Office, and USET. And we would not be able to do the things that we do between funding, support, education without those important partners. But like Kaylee talked about too, the great thing about developing new partnerships with treatment facilities and resource providers is that I can say, we pay you to provide these services for our people. So therefore, I'd like to ask you to do this and this so that they are more likely to be successful because they feel at home and they feel like you genuinely care and are invested in them. And the really cool thing about that is, like she said, when we send our people there, what we already know, what someone mentioned earlier, getting back to our ways, our good medicine ways is good for everybody. And other people want to be a part of that. So that increases that connection and that engagement with the community people around us. And it brings opportunities for them too, because it's for everybody, but it's especially for us. Oh, my favorite event is up next. So the Catawba River Ramble for Recovery, Erica was talking about some of the outreach and events that we're doing in our community. So the River Ramble for Recovery, oh wait, that's my husband right there. Very cute, even the back of his head. So the River Ramble for Recovery is a 6.5 mile kayak race along the Catawba River. In honor of National Recovery Month. So every September, we host this kayak race and we raise funds for our future healing village to be able to provide transitional housing and recovery resources for our community. This year, it takes place on September the 10th, and we're going to have a live band, cultural performances. So we'll have drummers and dancers, vendors, tribal vendors, food trucks, raffles, all the fun stuff. And it's on the Catawba River. And if you're interested in coming, just reach out. We would love to have you, even if you just come to spectate. We won't make you kayak 6.5 miles if you don't want to. But we'd love for you to.
We
if you want to
would.
bring other tribes or teams and give us some good competition, we'd love to have you with us.
So we really wanted to be able to get back to the basics and The river is a huge part of Catawba culture, and so what better way to celebrate that than to invite everybody to be on the water together. So it's always a fun day, and it's my favorite time of year.
So, August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day. This year, I'm very honored to be hosting a first-time event. So we're going to have an overdose awareness walk on the reservation on August the 31st from 12 to 2, where we are going to have family members of those within the community that we have lost to overdose wear shirts with their names on them in honor of their lives. And also we're going to walk around them in support of them and have prayer and a speech and drumming from our longhouse, which is our government facility on the reservation, down to the boat launch area where we're going to create prayer ties and offer prayers for those people, while also, discussing how we can stop overdoses from happening. And Challenges Inc. is going to join us there that day, and some other people at the end of the walk. So we're very proud of that. And I know that it is something that I will continue to work on and grow each year until we don't lose any more lives to overdose. So if anyone is in the South Carolina area on that day and you'd like to come and join us for that, it's not just for tribal citizens and households, it's for the community around us. And the more that we say something, the more that people are going to do something about it. And, it's time to stop the stigma and to do what we can, because these aren't just numbers and statistics. These are lives. August the 31st.
All right, so another event we have coming up for the first time this year is Mobilize Recovery. So Mobilize Recovery is a initiative of the Recovery Advocacy Project and the Voices Project. Its mission is to expand policy to support substance use disorder recovery, create connections to supportive services that are vital and life-saving, and to engage affected individuals in meaningful community action. So Catawba Nation was selected as one of the stops along the cross-country bus tour. So starting in late August, early September, they are going to debark on a cross-country bus tour from Las Vegas to New York City. And they're stopping at different communities across the nation to highlight what each community is doing to mobilize recovery, and what recovery looks like specific to all these different communities. So we applied, they selected us as one of their stops. And so on September the 15th, the bus will arrive at Catawba Nation, and they'll have press there to record us and stream us all over national TV or something. And then we're going to teach them about traditional Catawba methods of healing. So we'll introduce them to our sweat lodge. We will teach them about traditional medicines, participate in a smudging ceremony. They'll get to hear some drumming, and we'll also feed them a traditional meal. So we're pretty excited about that. And
so again, focusing on community connectedness and engagement, but also, we've heard so many people talk about how in treatment and in other environments and dealing with law enforcement and other people like that, so often the focus is on what a person did wrong, what that person's issues are, things that, don't really support what's right with those people and positive aspects of their life. So I was very proud and honored this year in the early spring to host our first ever sobriety banquet. So what this banquet meant was we had 12 tribal citizens who had at least 1 year of consistent sobriety through our programming, and helped to honor them, to honor all of the hard work that it took for them to go through and complete treatment, and also to celebrate all of the accomplishments that they have earned in that. So regaining custody of children, getting driver's licenses, getting GEDs, getting jobs, being able to pay their bills, getting the first home of their own that they're able to pay for, all of the things that are right with them. And this is something that really means a lot to me, and that we will continue to grow and to honor those people every year in more ways. So.
And we had a catered meal and a DJ
Oh, yeah.
and we partied. All right, so lastly, developing infrastructure that supports programming. So in order to make all this stuff work, you have to have a solid infrastructure in place. So we knew that a partnership and collaboration with public safety and law enforcement was going to be paramount in developing our drug action task force. So like I mentioned, our settlement agreement with the state allows York County Sheriff's Office jurisdiction within reservation boundaries. So in the last probably year, we've worked to establish our own tribal police department, and public safety has done a great job at restoring that relationship. We've got more deputies on the ground, and in developing our own police department, behavioral health wants to be an integral part of that, so that we can kind of have our say-so in how law enforcement operates in our community. We want to have a more community policing approach and restorative justice approach to law enforcement. So that's been a huge part of this. Developing a workforce. So we have contracted with an arsenal of telehealth providers to be able to accommodate the needs of our communities in terms of mental health providers. Ideally, we would obviously like to be able to have all those staff on our reservation, whether that be providing telehealth services or in person, but we're kind of working with what we got right now. So I think all of our providers are either Indigenous or work in Indigenous communities. So all of them have kind of been vetted, if you will, to their level of knowledge and expertise in working with our population. So pretty happy about that. And funding and sustainability. So we operate through grant funding. The USET Opioid Umbrella Project has been a huge part in helping us plan and build our program out. And we're also working towards being able to bill for services. So in the future, hopefully we'll be self-sustaining in terms of billing. Creating multidisciplinary teams has been incredibly important. So, the whole concept of healing through connection and having those connections with each other and with our partners, and creating multidisciplinary teams. So, I've always been of the kind of viewpoint that I'm not the person that knows it all and can solve all the problems. And, we need to kind of band together and tackle things and handle our own level or areas of expertise. And we all bring something important to the table to help meet the needs of our community. So multidisciplinary teams have been really important with the Drug Action Task Force, which kind of guides all of our programs, and also our case management team, which helps support the clients that we serve. Transportation and facilities, probably all of us are short on space and resources in terms of transportation. So we're kind of brainstorming options on how to deal with those space constraints. And then developing policies and procedures, but we have to have them. They provide a roadmap for day-to-day operations, and they ensure compliance with laws, regulations, and ethics, and give guidance for decision-making, and also streamline our process. So policies and procedures have been difficult, but necessary.
So in closing, this last picture is from our River Ramble last year. So as you can see, these are representatives from multi parts of the tribal staff and support. So Haley and myself, our food sovereignty person, someone that volunteered to provide services for us that day, our family services director, and someone as well from our Catawba service unit So one thing that I'm very proud to say, a lot of times in our community, when it's time to stand up and, look out for our people and find new and better ways, we all come together as a tribe, and that's what it takes. So in closing, I would like to say, Hawo Kurichore, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to share this time in this space with all of you. This is only the beginning for us. There is a lot more to come because we're willing to do the work that it takes, and we're all in this together. So, thank you.
I don't know. I have no clue what time it is.
Yes.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Yes.
One, I want to take the contact information, and two, you spoke about like the challenging things in regards to your harm reduction. What, can you elaborate more on that as like what it's helped you and like how far established your harm reduction program is? As well as, have you guys partnered with South Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition in order to get like Narcan?
We have not. So I need to get that information from you. Challenges Inc. is an organization. They're kind of a grassroots organization. South Carolina is sometimes difficult in terms of what services we can provide. So like clean needle exchange programs are a no-go. Challenges Inc. has found a creative way around that. So we're working with them. They're going to come. They operate out of Greenville, South Carolina, which is about 2.5 hours away from us, but they are going to come. They haven't started yet. We're still in the negotiation process, but they're going to come once a month to set up. They have a bus, like a mobile bus, and they set up around all areas of Greenville. But they're going to come to the reservation and set up at a couple of locations at different times and do needle exchange programming for us. So, it's the concept of harm reduction is if you can get people there, then there's your opportunity to share resources and connect them. And so that's kind of what our goal is, because obviously nobody's coming to the Longhouse saying, I need to exchange my needles so I don't get HIV or Hep C or, whatever. We have a big problem with our kids finding syringes and stuff on playgrounds and on the roadsides. And, we want to find a way to address that, that also destigmatizes addiction as well. So, but I would love that information from South Carolina Coalition.
Yeah, South Carolina.
Harm Reduction Coalition.
That's like my field. So I was the HIV program coordinator, and I traveled to EDCI, Eastern Cherokee, and they have a really good best practice.
Yes.
And that's where they were telling us that, they have the Ryan White that you can use, but there's also the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. There's one, I believe, in like every state. And I was looking it up while you're speaking, and they have the same concept of being able to get Narcan for addition, they have a funding resource that you can get Narcan. I'm not sure if there's other, things that they can provide, but that's one of the things that they got a lot of their materials. Because I was asking like how they got funded, and it wasn't through Ryan White. They said that they got a lot of their materials from the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was actually going to try to get something scheduled with EBCI to go up and visit their harm reduction programming.
So is there some, just not like piggyback on, but is it something that you want to like kind of make a bigger scale of for your harm reduction? If the funding was like available?
So yes, I would. We have to get buy-in from our leadership. Harm reduction is kind of, for people that are outside of behavioral health, can be kind of a scary concept, right? Like they don't understand why you would give needles to someone or, whatever. They don't understand the whole concept of medication assisted treatment, and they think it's just replacing one drug with another. And, you've all heard these things probably in your communities. And so that's one thing that we know we're kind of up against, and especially when it comes to needle exchange programming, because I think that's just a little bit scarier. When people think of syringes, it just freaks them out in general. So we know we're going to have to do some work on that. But in terms of our Division of Health and Human Services and our deputy tribal administrator, we're on board with harm reduction. And kind of amplifying that. We haven't had any programming because our behavioral health department is so new.
Well, I
So-
will say you've overcome the first challenge of just with the legalities that EBCI had to go through of getting permission. They had to go through like the police department, but I will say that you guys overcame a good obstacle using the Challenge Inc. So good on you.
Yeah, their motto is kind of ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So they've kind of gotten creative. They've never had an issue with setting up their bus anywhere in Greenville and surrounding areas. So I mean, we're hoping that if we can get buy-in from our leadership, that'll be the biggest hurdle to overcome. So.
And I think that's why, reaching out to people like Cherokee and other tribes who have already put things into place to show our leadership what they are doing and, the positive aspects of everything versus the negative aspects that some people have. But I would like to say that one of my long-term goals with that, if you look in the Southwest and up in the North, there are several tribes that have come together to create coalitions. So I think one of the ways that we could overcome a lot of the obstacles and have more direct connection to resources is by doing that. Reach out to Cherokee, reach out to some of the other Southwestern tribes and say, hey, we're stronger together than we are apart. And that's really the mindset that we should all have as Indigenous people, is that we're all connected. The Creator created us all, and we can, we make up a little over 4% of the total United States population, but if we all come together, we have the capability to make real and lasting change for all of our people. And that should be our goal, is healing. But also in doing that, we can take that information back to our leaders, but it's also important to say that, especially for federally recognized tribes like ourselves, understanding the true definition of what sovereignty really means. That means that we have the capability of creating policies and procedures to change these things that would supersede state because of the fact that we are sovereign. And that is something that tribes who, like us, have these issues, lost sovereignty, lost everything we have, gained it back, and like Haley said, are really new in a lot of the things that we're doing, especially all of these things, to get a real understanding of what that means and the power that we truly have to create our own laws and policies and procedures so that we aren't affected the way that we are by some of the state South Carolina laws that she's referring to in regards to needles, because it is harm reduction. Yes, it's not ideal to give people needles. We're not supporting people's use, but it's reducing, HIV, hepatitis, and all of these other things that are life-threatening, and that is harm reduction. But that also goes back to what we talked about with educating, what people don't understand. They fear. So education reduces that fear and increases their buy-in to things. And that's what we have to work on.
Well, thank you. This was a great presentation. Thank you guys so much. Are there any other questions? Anyone online have any questions at all? Okay. Well,
Our population is just over 3,600.
You had literally just starting from scratch and say from 1993, you guys once again be recognized.
Pretty much. Yeah, our governmental office was built, which we call the Longhouse, was built in 1993. So that's when basic services started, and we've grown from there. But this department, which started out as family services, has only been in place for less than 10 years. And with the changes and the growth and everything that we've had, now we're just starting to get to the point where we're able to do a lot of things that we are doing. But, necessity has driven a lot of these things. So.
Yeah, our behavioral health department is like 2 months old.
And there's only 4 of us, Haley, myself, a youth advocate, and the youth advocate's assistant. So.
Is most of the population there on reservation, or do they live out in the Rockville area?
About a third. So a third of the population lives on reservation, a third lives within our service area. So it'd be South Carolina and like
Mhm.
6 counties in North Carolina.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then, another third just lived all over
Yeah.
all over
Yeah.
the place.
Yeah. You're really well, but I was wondering, you've got quite a few that's on it.
Mhm.
And if I remember, too, for your elders, didn't you try and do housing organization out the elderly?
We have a senior program, senior center. We actually just got, the building completed, and so they have a beautiful new facility.
Okay.
But we don't have any specific housing for seniors, but I think that that's a plan.
But it was kind of like, maybe something you could, when you put a mobile home or, transfer or something on the land to help them.
I'm not sure about resources for that, do you know?
Yeah, not,
That was probably years
It
ago.
probably was before my time there. I don't know
we
if you
did,
remember any.
well, we did at one time with senior priority for housing, and then we also had a home health care for our seniors and elders as well in the beginning. And that is something that we're working on under the interdisciplinary team and some of the other things to bring back. As our IHS clinic comes out from underneath the 638 back to the control of the tribe, then we will re-implement some of those things, and wellness and senior home health care and all of those things will also be a part of the behavioral health side.
That's good. Is your healing village gonna be on the reservation also?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, land is a huge issue. So we need to annex and purchase more land. We have some land that's right around the area that we currently own that we could look at purchasing, but everything isn't just for us either. We need more housing. We have a serious housing shortage because of how small our reservation proper currently is. So, we need more land for housing. We need more land for economic development and other things like that as well. So we're just one of many things in the pot that we need to work on to meet all of the needs of our people.
Well, because that's really grown up so much.
Yeah, we've got Charlotte coming at us from one way, Fort Mill from another, so everything's just kind of growing in together. So it's like buy as much land and try to do what you can while the opportunity is there, especially if we can get land that is connected to the river.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the county just bought up all that land that's in between our reservations for a nature preserve or a park or something.
Oh, that's good.
It is good. It won't be developed too much, but yeah, right.
Any last questions, comments? Well, I guess that wraps it up. So thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're
I really
welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
A ballroom. Is it close here? Close right here? Oh, were we? Okay. Well, I wasn't in there eating. I was Bernice. Okay, okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
They're doing good.
Just y'all have a.
Dr. Haley is our behavioral health program director, so she could tell you more about who it is that we work with. I know we're trying to work some more on